Hello. Before you is the latest iteration of the JCPS Racial Equity Policy Principal Handbook. This version of the Principal Handbook was curated by current principals, assistant principals, counselors, executive administrators, and assistant superintendents. Thank you to those that were involved in the process. The handbook was condensed from its original version to be more user friendly, focusing on those attributes that are paramount to moving racial equity forward in our schools. This handbook is to be used as a reference for schools and staffs as we work to improve outcomes for students in JCPS, particularly those students that have been systematically marginalized. This handbook is broken down into 5 sections that you see before you in the table of contents. Each of the sections is bookmarked. If you click on the title in the table of content, it will take you to that particular section. With this latest iteration of the handbook, the emphasis is placed on the work centered on racial equity that should be taking place in our schools. In the first section, you will find a message from our Chief Equity Officer, Dr. John Marshall, emphasizing the importance of racial equity. Following Dr. Marshall's message, you will find the JCPS Racial Equity Policy, which highlights the district's commitment to racial equity and its 5 policy directives, which are diversity in curriculum, instruction, and assessment, school culture and climate, programmatic access, staffing and classroom diversity, and central office commitment to racial educational equity. And finally, the accountability measures as it relates to the fulfillment of this policy. The Department of Diversity, Equity, and Poverty have developed 5 anchor documents to undergird the work that takes place in the schoolhouse as it relates to the 5 policy directives in our racial equity policy. The work centered particularly around 4 of these anchor documents should be fibrous within schools and align with the JCPS 6 systems and 3 pillars. The use of the documents are non-negotiable as they are tied to district policy. In this section, there is a description of each document, expectations for use, and supporting links. Let's take a look at the first of the anchors, the Equity Monitoring Progress Tool, or EMPT. This tool is designed to ensure that all schools are pursuing the racial equity pillar and policy. The policy directives are embedded within in the form of domains. The EMPT is the basis for the racial equity work occurring in the schools and is the catalyst for racial equity goals and plans. The EMPT is submitted each year in the spring and should be a collaborative effort involving school administration, members of racial equity committees, as well as other staff. In this section, you will find several hyperlinks to supporting documents, one being the EMPT guidebook, also a blank copy of the EMPT, and a training video. You will also find how you can receive support with the EMPT and those documents previously mentioned. The Affirming Racial Equity Tool, or R tool, is a resource to support professional learning communities in incorporating more racially equitable practices into curriculum, instruction, and assessment. The R tool consists of 6 components that can be used throughout the PLC process weekly and for routine feedback and coaching from academic instructional coaches, assistant principals, and principals. It's expected that the R tool be used in tandem with the JCPS PLC framework. There's the R tool and PLC framework alignment document that can be used to help facilitate this process. Academic instructional coaches, assistant principals, and principals should embed the domains and/or descriptors of the R tool into their walkthrough and observation processes. There's a look for a document to support AICs and school administration with the development of this process. If support is needed with any of these documents, please reach out to our DEP specialist. The Racial Equity Analysis Protocol Tool, or REAP, is an instrument to be used when school leadership is making decisions that impact students. The expectation is that this protocol is used for every school based decision. This process should not be undergone by singular individuals, but should be undertaken by a diverse group of individuals within the school to have multiple perspectives on new ideas, initiatives, and existing practices. In this handbook, you will find several supporting documents that may be accessed via the hyperlinks. One is the REAP template. School teams should carefully and thoughtfully answer the 8 questions included in the REAP, as well as the next 3 next steps questions. You must specifically identify the racial and ethnic groups in questions 3 and 4. If support is needed with the REAP or any of the supporting documents within this principal handbook, you may reach out to Dr. Vanessa McPhail and or Dr. Taylor Utley. The Equity Scorecard is a resource that provides real-time data on academic proficiency, access, transition readiness, and suspension. Most data is updated yearly, while suspension is updated daily. Schools should use the Equity Scorecard as a means for benchmark and progress monitoring as it relates to school equity plans. Your school equity scorecard can be accessed by clicking on the link provided in this handbook, or you can access it through the District Data Management Center website and click on Envision Equity. Once in the equity scorecard, you will find several links, those to individual school data, as well as the district card that highlights the district data as a whole as it relates to those 5 areas previously mentioned. You will also find a district profile based on the most recent data that's available. You may also do a comparison from year to year based on the data that's available in terms of demographic makeup. If you should have questions or need support with the equity scorecard, feel free to reach out to Dr. Florence Chang or myself, BJ Buunton. The following section provides direction for the development, monitoring, and support of school racial equity plans. As stated previously, each school will be required to complete and submit to Diversity, Equity, and Poverty their equity monitoring progress tool during the spring of each school year. A team from DEP will review and provide feedback on each school's EMPT, which then will be provided to the area assistant superintendents and executive administrators by the end of June. Assistant superintendents and EAs will meet with school leadership to go over feedback. In turn, school leadership, in conjunction with the school's racial equity committee, will develop their racial equity plan, including SMART goals based on opportunities for growth and feedback from the EMPT. Each school will then complete a Google form for their SMART goal by the end of August to submit to DEP. As a means to monitor progress, each school's racial equity committee will conduct a mid-year reflection to be completed and submitted in December, and an end-of-year reflection to be completed and submitted prior to completion of the EMPT the following spring. The team from DEP will cluster schools and establish a potential network of support based on areas of focus identified in the submitted SMART goals. Support can be provided by DEP to schools in a manner that is more efficient, and schools can support one another in the work as well. DEP has a menu of support which outlines professional learning opportunities provided by DEP for the school year with clear connections to the R tool and or domains of the ENPT. For the 2021-22 and 2022-23 school years, there will be an opportunity to request additional funds to support the fulfillment of racial equity plans, SMART goals. Schools can choose from a menu of nationally renowned practitioners in the field of racial equity to work with them. Each school will have a racial equity committee in place. The racial equity committee should consist of a diverse group of stakeholders within the school, including administrators, teachers, classified staff, and also parents and students, if applicable. There's a form to be completed and submitted by the end of August of each school year that identifies the school's racial equity committee as well as their meeting schedule for the year. We'll come to the final section of our Racial Equity Principle Handbook, the resource section. In this section, you'll find additional resources that school leadership can access to support the work. Let's take a look at a few of the items located in this section. One item is the DEP Menu of Supports. The Menu of Supports is professional development that will be provided by Diversity, Equity, and Poverty during the course of the school year to help strengthen the work that is occurring in schools around racial equity. You'll find the title, dates, times, facilitators of this professional development. And not only that, you'll find a connection to the R tool and connections to the ENPT. School leadership and racial equity committees can utilize the professional development that is provided to help strengthen their work around racial equity and their SMART goals. Another resource is employee resource groups, headed by our employee resource manager, Ms. Jasmine Drinker. The employee resource groups are voluntary employee-led groups that help to foster inclusion in the workplace. The 2021-2022 school year, there will be 7 ERGs or employee resource groups that we're encouraging all employees to join. Again, this is just an opportunity to be able to find a space and place for those folks that feel like they are marginalized or need an outlet and need to be able to connect with someone that has like interests. If interested, please contact Ms. Jasmine Drinkard, our employee resource manager, and her contact information can be found here. Another resource that I would encourage all school leaders in schools to really dig into is the Let's Talk About Race School Level Sets. School leadership can access this document in order to find subject matter to support ongoing conversation about race and racial equity with their staff. DEP has provided a level set discussion video and accompanying slide deck as a model. This resource is not the end all be all per se, but can be used as a source to spark thoughtful dialogue. This is a living document and will be updated during the course of the year. Another resource that may prove to be helpful is the Diversity and Equity Glossary of Terms. The Glossary of Terms provides vocabulary and also a definition for the vocabulary that is frequently associated with equity or racial equity. In this document, you will also find supporting or supportive resources, videos, articles, etc., that are attached to that vocabulary. There are also tie-ins to the DEP anchor documents as well. And finally, a document that we also would encourage you to utilize and look at is the curriculum vitae, which is a DEP resume of sorts, and it just provides a comprehensive breakdown of all the various offerings that DEP has, um, and some of the work that DEP has done over the years. New for the 2020-2021 school year is the Equity Screener. The Equity Screener is a tool utilized as part of the school leadership selection process, which calls for JCPS staff to address the historical marginalization and disproportionate outcomes of students of color. The Equity Screener establishes an expectation that all JCPS staff should be willing, able, and proven to lead with equity in mind. Candidates seeking school leadership positions, including principal, assistant principal, and counselors, will be required to provide evidence of their competencies and demonstrated actions across four dispositions. The four dispositions are data driven equity solutions, culturally competent practice, disruptive equity leadership, and reflection and growth on equity practice. For more questions regarding the equity screener, you may contact Mr. Dewan Williams. The Racial Equity Reflection Guide is a resource available to school staff and JCPS to allow various role groups to reflect, remind, refocus their efforts around racial equity. JCPS vehemently believes that racial equity must be the focus in order to usher in academic change for all students. It's imperative that JCPS creates a climate that is fully comforting and complementary, as well as supports a complete curriculum for all students, families, and staff. This reflection guide can be a catalyst to the discussion and/or review of practices/policies that perpetuate the continued marginalization of students of color. The Racial Equity Reflection Guide should be used prior to teams/committee work, such as ILT, PBIS, PLC, MTSS, attendance, backpack, behavior support, trauma, etc., to assist with identifying gaps in knowledge, cultural competence, and implicit bias. School representatives are welcome to contact Mr. Dewan Williams, specialist in DEP, for resources to support the use of the Reflection Guide. This concludes the presentation of our Racial Equity Policy Principle Handbook. If you should have questions in reference to this handbook, please feel free to reach out to BJ Buunton, Executive Administrator for Diversity, Equity, and Poverty, at william.bunton@jefferson.kyschools.us, or by phone at 502 485 7985.